My name's Natalie. I've been married to my husband, Smith, for 20 years. We met through a friend when we were both in our mid-40s. Our family includes our daughter, Evelyn, our son, Watson, and my mother-in-law. Before we tied the knot, Smith seemed like a caring guy who loved his mom. However, after marriage, it became clear that his mom favored him greatly, and he often put her needs above ours. Whenever I tried to discuss the difficult treatment I received from my mother-in-law, Smith would side with her, saying she was right, and he wouldn't listen to my perspective. Life was manageable when we lived separately from my mother-in-law. But when our second child, our son, was born, my father-in-law suddenly passed away. Worried about my mother-in-law, Smith suggested we move in with her. After we started living together, my mother-in-law's treatment of me got even worse. With 2 kids to care for and the addition of my mother-in-law's living expenses to our budget, my husband's income couldn't cover everything, including our loans. So I had to find work too. However, my mother-in-law didn't approve, insisting that I should stay home and manage household chores. Despite her objections, I had no choice but to work full-time. Balancing work and housework became challenging, and I asked my husband for help. Instead of pitching in, he spent his time lounging on the sofa, playing games on his smartphone. Even when he was home, he didn't contribute. Rather than correcting him, my mother-in-law supported his laziness, saying he was tired from work and that I should handle everything. She refused to help with anything, leaving all the responsibilities to me. My husband seemed content with this arrangement and stopped helping around the house altogether. In the end, while juggling a full-time job, I had to manage all the household chores and childcare for our family of 4, including my mother-in-law. To make things more difficult, my mother-in-law insisted on receiving a $500 monthly allowance from our household budget, despite not contributing anything. She didn't put a single dollar towards her own expenses. Everything came out of our budget, including her food and utility bills. On top of that, she demanded an allowance from our income. Naturally, I refused, but she argued that since it's my husband's earnings, I had no say in how it's spent. My husband sided with her, claiming it's his money and he can give it to his mom if he wants. Neither of them understood why I had to work full-time. If I ever cut corners on housework due to my busy schedule, my mother-in-law would criticize everything, from the meals I made to how I cleaned. She'd comment on takeout dinners, saying, "Poor kids," or remark about my cleaning being sloppy. Even when I asked for help with the kids, neither my husband nor my mother-in-law would lift a finger. My mother-in-law's favorite line was how she did all the housework and childcare herself when she was young, boasting about her skills as a wife and mother and implying that I fell short in both roles. Adding insult to injury, my husband would just stay silent, making me feel even worse. But what hurt the most was when my mother-in-law told my kids, "You two are really unfortunate, and such a careless person doesn't deserve to be a mother." Despite never neglecting my daughter or son, my mother-in-law had the audacity to accuse me of being careless. Thinking about how my kids must have felt hearing that made me incredibly frustrated. Then, one day, it came to light that my husband was having an affair. He who neglected his responsibilities around the house and blamed me for nagging betrayed me. Even after this revelation, he and my mother-in-law shifted the blame onto me, saying I wasn't a good enough wife. They suggested that if I had complaints, I should just leave. All my efforts to keep our home together felt futile, and I felt something inside me break. As our marital discussions continued, I grew increasingly exhausted. Finally, during one of our talks, I made the decision to leave the house. My mother-in-law neither got angry nor surprised. She simply laughed and dismissed my departure. My husband was indifferent, saying it wouldn't make much of a difference whether I was there or not. It seemed like he already planned to invite his affair partner home. They both believed their lives wouldn't change if I left. I questioned what all my efforts for the family had been for, feeling more empty than sad. When the divorce was settled, I asked my kids what they wanted to do. My teenage daughter and son decided to stay with their grandmother, saying she could handle things. They didn't even consider leaving with me. Hearing their response, my mother-in-law smiled smugly, reinforcing her belief that nobody would want to be with a mother who couldn't manage household chores or childcare. She assured me that she would take care of everything perfectly. From now on, unlike you, she sneered, my husband just said, I feel better leaving it to mom. In the end, I left the house without my kids. A few days later, as I was leaving, my mother-in-law taunted, leaving your kids behind? You're the worst kind of wife. Months after leaving, I finally stabilized my life. Then, out of the blue, I got a call from my mother-in-law. Natalie, where are you? She asked frantically. I had left my contact info for the sake of my kids, but I wasn't prepared for her call. Why do you need to know? I have no relation to that house anymore, I replied. What are you talking about? Our home is a mess because you left, she explained. According to my mother-in-law, everything had gone downhill since I left. I was inwardly stunned, unsure of how to react. Mother-in-law continued, every weekend, I have to accompany Watson to his soccer club. When there's a match, I even have to drive and buy drinks for everyone when it's our turn. Plus, there are muddy uniforms to wash. No one told me parents had to polish soccer balls. Then, there's driving Natalie to and from her school. And it's costing extra for remedial classes. On top of that, Smith's income isn't enough to cover the mortgage, so now he's telling me to work. I have to get a part-time job. And Smith, when he gets home, he just lies on the sofa. He can't even put his dirty clothes in the laundry basket. I'm tired from working part-time. But he does nothing, saying he's tired. I have to do all the housework and laundry for the entire family by myself. And yet, all she does is complain about the food I make. Mother-in-law's voice was almost a scream, but I calmly responded, weren't you and Smith the ones who told me to leave? Weren't you supposed to handle everything perfectly on your own, unlike me? I could tell mother-in-law was shocked on the other end of the phone. Her current situation was exactly where I had been just a few months ago, working to support the family, handling all the housework and childcare alone, and dealing with a husband who wouldn't help. Except she didn't have me to complain about, so she was better off. Probably the woman who was my husband's cheating partner, whom mother-in-law expected to be a labor force, left him right after I moved out. It would be who would want to join a household with mother-in-law and 2 kids from a previous marriage. They probably thought she would fill the gap I left. But their plan failed, and now mother-in-law finally realized the gravity of the situation too late. And this was exactly the outcome my kids and I had anticipated. Of course, I will say this so that there is no misunderstanding. Let me clarify. Evelyn and Watson are very kind kids. They always offered to help, saying, Mom, let me assist you, or I can do this myself. They had seen how their father and grandmother treated me and were well aware of it. When I was finally pushed to the point of leaving, I first talked to my daughter and son. They immediately took my side. You've done enough, Mom. You should leave this house, my daughter said. I agree, Dad and Grandma are the ones at fault, my son added. They even offered to come with me. But then my daughter said, even if we leave, Dad and Grandma will never understand the struggles you've been through. Yeah, they probably feel relieved, my son added. We can't let that happen. They should realize how hard it's been for you. They chose to stay, thinking their father and grandmother would never understand my struggles if they left too. With that in mind, the 2 chose to stay at home on their own. Mother-in-law had no idea about this and assumed I had abandoned my kids. The outcome was clear. I never had high hopes for my husband, but mother-in-law couldn't possibly replace me in supporting the family, doing housework, and raising kids. And with just my husband's income, they couldn't even manage the household finances, let alone. Mother-in-law probably finally realized where her allowance had been coming from. I had been the one doing all the housework and taking care of the kids while working. My husband and mother-in-law did nothing but complain, pushing everything onto me. Now they must have felt firsthand what I had been juggling all along. I regularly receive updates from my kids about the situation at home. I even heard from them that my husband's plans to remarry his affair partner had fallen through. Mother-in-law had to get a part-time job because my income was gone. She was struggling with housework and childcare, while my husband remained as unhelpful as ever. He still did no housework, took no responsibility for the children, and everything became a burden on mother-in-law. My kids told me all of this. Thanks to them, the house was a mess, and the meals were mostly half-hearted. They must realize now how hard you had it, Mom. They must have understood more than ever who had been holding that household together, my kids said. Please, Natalie, come back, mother-in-law pleaded. Understood, I replied, and I could hear the relief in her voice. So you're coming back? She asked. But I answered clearly and loudly, no, I'm not coming back. What I've realized is that I can't trust you or Smith with my children. I'll be taking my daughter and son. They want that too. What, you left them behind, didn't you? Mother-in-law sounded confused, but I continued. My kids have been watching all along. After that, my daughter, son, and I started a new life together. Of course, I made sure to claim compensation and child support through my lawyer during the divorce proceedings. I took a lump sum, thinking of the future. My husband and mother-in-law had to give up their house because they paid the lump sum child support and fell behind on their mortgage. To add insult to injury, I later found out that the reason my husband didn't remarry his affair partner was that she already had a family. He ended up being sued for compensation in another divorce case, leading him into debt. Now they're living in a cramped apartment, blaming each other for their woes. It's sad for a family to end up like this. As for us, the three of us are living happily, supporting each other every step of the way.